Om Mani Om Mani Padme Om Mani Uh, Good morning and welcome to the Sunday service. This morning we're going to meditate meditation. Few minutes after that, Dhamma talk is going to give a Upasaka Subodha. After Dhamma talk, question and answer. Then last item is chanting. Right now, Reverend Chandasara is going to lead the loving kindness meditation.
Good morning to everyone. Now let us practice loving kindness meditation. So before that, we take breathe in and breathe out for 3 times very relaxedly, to relax our mind and body. Let's be seated in a comfortable and upright posture, and then spread loving kindness thoughts in this way. May all the living beings be free from physical illnesses. May all the living beings be free from external danger. May all the living beings be free from mental illnesses. Let's continue spreading loving kindness thoughts in this way until we hear the bell sound. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, the Sarah. Now is Subodha is going to start the talk. Thank you very much, Subodha, being with us today. You can start your Dhamma talk right now.
Okay, thank you, Bhante. I pay homage to the Buddha. I pay homage to the Dhamma. I pay homage to the Sangha. So lately, I've been busy teaching a Dharma class of young children from about 6 to 12. And I started doing this because a friend of mine that I made at University of the West is a Vietnamese nun who lives down in, I think, Escondido. And at her temple, she is in charge of the children's Dharma school. And with plenty of time off in between semesters, she knew that I had some free time in the evenings and said, hey, how would you love to teach some of the kids and give maybe a month and a half long series of lessons? And so I said yes. And so I've been teaching these children, all, like I said, between the ages of 6 and 12, Vietnamese American, and I've been teaching them the Eightfold Path, starting with right view. And so just this last Thursday, we finished our lesson on right speech. And so far, it has been such a delight to see these bright and beautiful children all staring at me on a Zoom screen, because that's how everyone learns these days. And seeing them participate to varying levels of interest, but a surprising number, very, very interested in learning more about the Dharma. And so on one hand, it's a little bitter that it has to be via Zoom, because I think it'd be so much to see all their faces in person, face to face, to sit in the same room together and see them smile and smirk and see them think about things as we discuss things. But I will say that one of the benefits of being on Zoom is that it has widened the scope of my friend's Dharma school, so that now there are students there all the way from the West Coast to the East Coast. In fact, there's at least one student there who's from New York. And I'm so glad that they're able to participate in something like this. Now, in various temples across the world, but I'm going to focus on the United States, there are a lot of Dharma schools for children. But it's one of the few things that I haven't, well, I shouldn't say one of the few, but it's one of the things I haven't seen really catch on in more Western and Americanized temples and meditation centers, focusing on educating children, or even really having a lot of services for children. And I was thinking on why it's so appealing to me, why it's something that interests me so deeply. And I think that part of it, for me at least, is because I had an interest in Buddhism at that same age. I was about 11 or 12 when I started learning about Buddhism. But as a Westerner in the United States, growing up in a very relaxed Catholic family, but a Catholic family, meant that my only access to the Dharma, the only access to Buddhism I had, was in the books that I found at libraries and bookstores, which meant that I had no guide, no one to take me by the hand and show me what was worth learning and what wasn't. That at that age, around 12, 13, I was just sort of fumbling around, picking up every single book I could on Buddhism with no real sense of discernment, knowing what was good Buddhism or good Dharma and what was stuff pretending to even be Dharma, and what stuff was someone actually coming in with good advice and what was a bunch of nonsense. No real way of telling. But then also at that young age, some books were just so dense and scholarly for me that I could make no sense of anything they were talking about. Scholars writing on the topics that you find in this scroll and this particular book and this phrase and the permutations and etymology of this and that. And it all went way over my head. And so I had a tendency to gravitate towards those books that were pretty much the nuts and bolts of meditation, which meant that for much of my adolescence, so most of my teen years, I really didn't think about Buddhism as anything other than meditation, that it was only meditation. And so now I think back to this class I'm teaching to these young children, and they're getting to get the whole picture. They're getting the Eightfold Path taught to them, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, and seeing the whole path and finding ways that they can start practicing it now and making a habit now at that young age. And to me, that's beautiful. That's profound. One might say that I'm even a little envious of them. Man, I wish I was in their seat. That'd be so cool to be 7, 8 years old and learning about the Dharma. But importantly, learning about the Dharma, learning about Buddhism as a life path, as a way of life. And I think that that's the big part there. Because a lot of what we find, if we don't have a guide or a teacher or a community or a temple, what we find in the books, unfortunately, is Buddhist meditation more as a technique or as a DIY psychotherapy, which I think puts a limit and a constraint on the Buddha's Dharma that leaves people walking away. How many people have we heard that say, I can't meditate, right? And so they just walk away from it because they tried meditation for 2 weeks, found out their mind was a forest fire and just decided to leave the fire where it was and look the other direction. But it's because that's all they had, whatever it is they could find online or in a book or something that just described a bare bones, empty, dry technique in a sort of cut and paste way. And they try to apply it and find it doesn't work because they have no guide there to help them figure out what's worth focusing on and what's not, how to let things move along and when to really examine something and when to apply pressure and when to apply change. That's one of the benefits of having a guide. That's when you know what's worth doing at a given time. But also seeing the entire Eightfold Path as something truly holistic. And I mean holistic in the philosophical sense of something altogether being greater than the sum of its parts, or otherwise not being able to talk about the part without reference to the whole, meaning that you can't just separate one aspect of the Eightfold Path and act like that's the entirety of the thing. You can't focus on just mindfulness and have that be the whole thing. You can't only focus on right view and have that be the whole thing. But it's the sum of its parts in that holistic sense. But then also as it applies to the person implementing the path, even then it's holistic and that it encompasses the entire body and mind and it encompasses every aspect of life. Holistic in that sense. Not California, LA holistic, which I think is mostly yoga mats, squeezed orange juice and lavender candles or whatever, right? Not that, not the self-care sort of holistic, but truly holistic, a life path, something that ends up being not even an aspect, being the whole of one's life. I think that that's when we really see the Dharma bloom in our lives and take on an energy and a momentum that we don't see if we only focus on one aspect or only look at it as one thing, this Buddha Dharma. If we only look at it as meditation or only look at it as a kind of calming technique or as a kind of psychotherapy that it just soothes the mind and relaxes it when it's frazzled. And that means that when we approach the Dharma as a holistic life path or a way of life, it's something that is with us in every moment of every day, repeatedly. It becomes habitual. It becomes the way we move in the world. So it's not just what we do when we're sitting, it's what we do when we're standing, when we're walking, when we're lying. That's part of why when the Buddha talks about the Satipatthana, the 4 foundations of mindfulness or the 4 establishings of mindfulness, there's all these different postures. It's not simply that saying that these are 4 ways of meditating, but rather that in any mode of life, whatever it is you're doing, there can be some aspect in the mind that is meditating, in the sense of examining and watching and also changing, redirecting. One of the beautiful things about looking at Buddhism as a life path rather than just a technique, something you do a little bit in the morning and a little bit in the evening, is that you get to see that there's a bit of fabrication going on at every moment of every time. Fabrication in the sense that we're always creating, constructing, shaping, and molding our reality in our mind all the time. And when you do apply mindfulness, which is something the Buddha did say was useful, of all the different tools we have in the toolbox, the Buddha did say that mindfulness is one of the few that's useful all of the time. Some are useful in one situation, some not. You probably don't want to be in a deep, absorbed state of concentration while you're driving on the freeway. Please don't. You might as well be on your cell phone at that point, with all the good it'll do you. But something like mindfulness, in terms of applying ardency, alertness, and our memory of the Dharma, and our ability to keep something in mind, that is a quality that we can take with us in whatever we do. That builds the foundation of our ability to implement stuff like right thought, right action, right speech, the rest of the path. We see the way it's all interconnected, holistic in that sense, something that we can carry through in every moment. Thinking of it this way reminds me of another friend of mine. He's a monk that likes to share some memes he finds on Instagram every once in a while. And it's all in good fun, but he had a comparison between a meditator, let's say in the Buddha's time, or even a few centuries ago, and a meditator today. And so the meditator of the past says, you know, I've been meditating 4 hours today, and now I'm going to go work in the rice paddy fields for an extra 14, right? And that's also still meditation. And then the modern meditator, well, I meditate for about 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening, and call it a day, right? And my takeaway from that is to not be condescending or mean or anything to the person who only has about 20 minutes or so a day for actual formal sitting. My takeaway is thinking that just because you only have that 20 minutes to sit in formal meditation, that's the only meditation you can do throughout the day, or the only time the Dharma can be alive in your day, rather than seeing all the ways that it can be there if we make room for it, if we change our lives enough to accommodate it. And I do think that that's a part of seeing the Dharma as a way of life, is that the Dharma, all of the teachings of the Buddha, but also all of the techniques and tools, all the applications that we learn, all the skills that we're cultivating to become more skillful, those are the very things that become part of our life and then over time become our life. And that means that our life changes. And I do honestly believe that many people come to Buddhism hoping that their life changes. But I think it's easy for many of us to assume that change happens in a very alchemical, magical way. You basically live your life the same way for 23 hours, but for that 1 hour that you've broken up into the morning and evening, you do something a little different, and that's going to change everything. Which I think puts a lot of pressure on meditation that might be undue and unfair. Not to say that meditation isn't transformative. If any of you have been to at least just even 2 or 3 of my talks, you've probably heard of me talk about meditation as so important to the Buddhist path that the rest of the path are considered the supports of meditation. That when the Buddha was teaching his disciples, his monks and lay people, he really was emphasizing the importance of meditation, concentration especially, and the idea of jhana and seclusion and all these things. That if you read it in the Pali Sutras, you can't help but come across it again and again. But that isn't to mean that there isn't something going on the rest of the time outside of formal sitting. But that formal sitting that we do becomes the impetus, becomes the way in which we can start carrying ourselves through the rest of the day. If we are able to get off the cushion and continue that mental state through our actions, through our tasks through the day, there is something different that happens compared to, say, the usual mode for many of us, which is we do our meditation, and then the moment we hear that gong, we hear that bell, we hear the timer on our phone, all of a sudden all the regular thoughts of the day flood right in, all the regular modes of being flood right in, and we go right back to doing the same stuff that we've been doing years and years and years into our lives, and then not seeing any progress and wondering why. The reason why I focus on concentration and jhana and why I point out how the Buddha teaches it as a pleasant abiding here and now is because it gives that strong foundation when the mind is at ease and peaceful, when the storm has settled and the water starts to be nice and flat on the horizon. From that point, that's when we're able to really see a lot of the other stuff coming up in the mind. That's when we're able to see the greed and the aversion and the delusion. That's how we see it work, because in a frenzied mind, in our usual busy mode of being, all that stuff, we're just too caught up in it. We're too close to it, and we're too in it. We've already done the claiming of me and mine. We've already selfed ourselves into the situation. But being able to use meditation as a point to sit and watch, and then from that watching, being able to do something about it, applying skillful right effort, right? The four mental states, trying to subdue any negative thoughts that already have arisen, trying to stop negative thoughts from arising, or rather unskillful thoughts, and then doing the same for skillful thoughts, cultivating, nurturing the skillful thoughts that are already there, but then also trying to create the foundations, enrich the soil so that more skillful thoughts proliferate in the mind. That's the kind of thing that we can do once we've actually used meditation as the basis for the rest of our day. And to feed that loop, it creates a cycle, a feedback loop in which our meditation can flavor and infuse our day with the Dharma as we focus on right thought, as we focus on right speech, on right action, right livelihood, and everything else. But then the very doing of those things feeds into the meditation. And one way of looking at it is seeing Sila actually coming first before the meditation, that we have to start making changes in our lives before we're likely to see more results in our meditation. Otherwise, we might hit a plateau. We might get to a point where it stops if we only focus on the meditative side. If we're only meditating and expecting our day-to-day actions to change, they might, and they will. I've even seen it happen to myself where that's happened. But then there comes a point where it stops. And then what we need to do is look at which aspect of the Eightfold Path needs to be really nurtured. Is it Sila? Is it Samadhi? Is it Panya? Panya in the sense of discernment, our ability to look at a situation and understand and tweeze out what is skillful and unskillful. When we look at those, we can see which one needs more attention right now to keep the wheel turning, this Dharma wheel turning. And there are many times when we do have to focus more on meditation and on stillness and return to seclusion, secluding the senses, secluding the mind, creating a pleasant abiding here and now. But also plenty of times when we have to look at our lives and see what it is we're doing with our time, with our energy, our interactions with others, how we entertain ourselves, which really comes down to how we're feeding the brain, how we're feeding the mind. I was talking to these young students about that on Thursday, hopefully in language that they could understand. But there was this sense of like, well, you in the world as young people, how are you approaching social media that even at the age of 7, 8, 9, 10, you already have access to? How do you apply skillful speech there? And not only in terms of what you say, but also what you hear, what you take in. And I had these kids, 9, 10, admitting, well, yeah, I do use a lot of curse words at school around my friends, but like not at home with my parents, and not in this situation, but yeah, and well, and also like what kind of stuff are you watching? Like what kind of movies, TV shows, are you watching stuff with a lot of violence and things like that? And the reason why I bring that up is that after a while, as your senses get more attuned to what's going on in the mind, you get to see how the mind is impacted by things. Right? You see how the things that you used to like, they affect the brain differently, and then you start liking them less. Or if you really do actually pay attention, you realize there's not much to like. And so I brought up the violent movies, and this one kid says, well, my grandma and I like to watch like gangster movies together. And like, oh man, that's pretty severe. And he's like, well, does that mean I need to stop watching them? And, I had to look at this kid and say, well, I can't just say, hey, no, you gotta stop watching that stuff. Can't watch it at all. And in this weird moralistic way. But I did tell him, well, you might want to start watching other things, maybe reading other things, read a book or something like that, that are more wholesome, that are more conducive to good, skillful mental states, like good thoughts, is the way I said it to him, and see how that makes you feel. And we do this all the time in our own lives without realizing that's what we're doing. Like, as a lot of us get older, we start having stomach issues with stuff we didn't have before, acid reflux and all these things start happening. So used to love having super acidic black coffee in the morning, every morning, no problem. You'd drink cups of it. You'd have 7-8 cups in a day, right? And then after a while, that coffee doesn't sit in the stomach the right way anymore. It sours the stomach. You start feeling nauseous, sick. You feel all the acid reflux. And then even still, even though the evidence is right in front of you that you probably need to stop with the coffee, you go, well, maybe it isn't the coffee. I'm going to try giving up the milk first. Maybe I'm putting too much sugar in the coffee. Maybe it's because the tea I'm drinking later in the day. I'm going to stop drinking the tea. And you start trying to troubleshoot your life, ignoring the fact, it's the coffee. That's what's going on. And after enough time, you go, well, okay, time to stop doing something that's clearly hurting me, that is making me unwell. And then you cast it aside. And I've done this with more serious things too, just in terms of entertainment. For a long time, I was a big martial arts fan. So I used to watch a lot of action movies, and it was one of the ways I used to bond with my father, because he loved all the 80s action flicks. And so I'd end up watching them right along with him, like Universal Soldier, anything with Arnold Schwarzenegger too, throw that in there as well, and all the stuff, Rambo and everything. And then from there, it just took on a life of its own, just watching more and more crazy action flicks and getting caught up in other stuff too. And scary movies was a huge thing for me too. I loved scary movies, loved to be scared. I would watch Freddy Krueger and all that other stuff, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, all that stuff. And then it got to a point where all that stuff didn't scare me anymore, because it all seemed like fantasy, all this stuff. And the action movies weren't action enough. I needed more action. And so you can see the patterns start changing in the brain, the way it starts needing more and more of that thing. You want to kind of find more of it. And so to shift into say more of the scary stuff, because another example popped in. After a while, the scary movies weren't scary enough, because all the witches, ghosts, and goblins weren't doing it for me. So I started listening to podcasts about real world serial killers, right? Like, oh. And then you realize that that's how you spend all your day. You're just listening to that stuff, listening to that stuff, listening to that stuff. And then it's just in your head all day. And I'm not saying someone's going to listen to that and go do those things, because whoever's going to do that probably would do that without it, right? But the point is, you have those images in your head, which means that when you sit down to meditate, well, guess what images are right there? The story of that guy who did this thing and that thing, the story of that person who did this and this. And we see that whatever it is we're filling our brain with, that's what we find when we sit. That's what we find when we meditate. And so part of the seclusion that I keep emphasizing is not just the seclusion of finding time to sit, going on a retreat, staying at a monastery, visiting a temple, or even spending a day at home on your cushion. That is also seclusion. In fact, that's a big part of seclusion. But there's also seclusion in the sense of how we live our lives, what we do day to day, what we see, what we hear, what we taste, how we talk to others, how others talk to us, the relationships we maintain. And that's how we start getting that larger sense of the holistic path, the way it's all connected, and how everything that we do is also connected. A lot of the time we can get caught up in the metaphysics of it all, understand the interconnectedness of all things, or all the way it all connects. But we can also just apply this to the body and mind, and how they're interconnected, and the way what we do throughout our day affects the mind. And the mind is that precious thing that the Buddha reminds us about all the time, the mind and the heart. time and time again, saying that this precedes everything, everything in our direct experience, the fathom long body and mind, right? All of this right here, this is what we're focusing on, the mind and heart, right? And I come back to it again and again for the same reason, because this is what we're trying to protect. This is what we're trying to nurture, hold on to, and care for. And it's in doing so that we actually find the best way to care for others, to extend that to everyone else. I got to teach these kids about metta and, loving kindness, loving friendliness, goodwill, and helping them realize that it's not just something that's outwardly focused, something that we just look out and only look at others and how they're doing, but that it always has to start from within. Even things like goodwill and compassion and sympathetic joy, that those qualities, and equanimity as well, that it has to start from within. That we got to have those same nurturing, kind, and loving feelings towards ourselves. And so that brings us back again to the mind. Like, do we care for our mind throughout our day, throughout our daily actions? Are we guarding and protecting the mind, secluding it from what the world wants to assail it with? And that does require making changes in one's life. That's one of the things that I think a lot of us struggle with. Any type of change that might be seen as an inconvenience or stops the fun, like I know a lot of people within my own age group that don't want to let go of any semblance of youth, because for them it's like some kind of way of giving up. And so while I'm staying in on a Saturday, and I think I went to bed at 9:30, the rest of them are still out there doing who knows what, especially in Orange County, because the restrictions are a little different in Orange County. So they might be up to all sorts of stuff, right? But there are all these pressures and desires, and we want to say yes to all of it. I've come across many people in my exploration of different religious paths who have a tendency to want to have the cake and eat it too, as it were. They want the sacred and profane in some kind of weird twisted sandwich. And there's this impetus to not want to change their lives. And then you're caught in this weird state of limbo, because you want your life to change. You just don't want to change to make your life change. But that's precisely what the whole path is about. If you lay out the whole Eightfold Path, the whole thing is about changing, right? Changing the way you understand, the way you think, the way you speak, the way you act, the way you live, applying effort, mindfulness, and concentration to affect the mind and change the mind, the way it thinks, changing the habitual patterns in relation to craving and in relation to clinging, in relation to aversion and delusion, all of that. The whole path is change, but it requires real action. There's no passively relaxing our way to the goal. There's no just one technique that we apply in the morning and the evening like it's body lotion, right? It takes real effort. But that effort is worthwhile. And that effort over time becomes one's fun, one's entertainment, especially as it builds momentum. As you see the changes coming more easily over time, it's much easier to give up on the things that felt like you couldn't let go of before, because you realize that by letting go of that, you make room for something better. One of my teachers says that this is like exchanging candy for gold in terms of its worth. Candy is satisfying in the immediate. You pop it in your mouth, it tastes good. Maybe it's a Jolly Rancher, green apple. But then you compare that to something like gold that has worth not only for oneself, but everyone around you too. Everyone recognizes the worth of gold, right? And so that's just an analogy, but it's the same idea that as we're focusing on the path, we're letting go of things to make room for better things that give us a more stable kind of happiness. And I understand that sometimes it can feel weird to talk about happiness in a Buddhist sense, because isn't searching for happiness part of the problem? Isn't that one of the things that everyone else is doing? If you look at the way the normal worldling is, the way the Buddha would say it, well, all they're doing is happiness craziness. They're always seeking out happiness. You see the drive to be happy and have experiences and collect experiences. They got to go to this music concert. They have to go to that show. They have to make sure they're seen here on their Instagram and so on. And all these things they have to do, all the busyness of it. And so we can get the impression that the Buddhist path is not about happiness, because like, look at all those people who pretend to be happy. Remember, we're the ones who talk about suffering all the time. So clearly we're not talking about happiness, right? But the truth is, we talk about suffering because we recognize that there is a way to be happy. The very first part of the Eightfold Path, right view, is about the Four Noble Truths and recognizing that their whole promise is not that everything is suffering, but that there is suffering, and suffering has an end. And that's what we're always striving for, the end of suffering, to open ourselves up to happiness. All right. So I think I will end right here and see if there are any questions or comments or your own experiences in trying to apply the Dharma. I'm open to it all. I would love to hear everyone.
Good morning, Sabota. This is Vincent. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for the talk. Yeah, I'm extremely grateful. Most of my foundation in the practice comes from books, and beyond that, I really didn't have any formal practice, and sort of self-taught, as it were, and reading a lot of John Cornfield and Thich Nhat Hanh, and it was just really a pleasure to connect with a sangha eventually, and to understand that that I was doing okay, I guess, in a sense. I love your forest fire analogy there. That really spoke to me. I have actually used driving as a meditative practice, but for me, it's more about being mindful about how I'm driving, looking left, looking right, noticing maybe how I go over the bumps and how that feels. And I heard one time, mindfulness keeps us safe, and using it in that way and not listening to the radio. So anyway, thank you so much for your talk today, and it's really good to see you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Vincent. It's good to see you as well, virtually. Hopefully soon we'll be able to see each other in person again. I do bring it up because I think that it is common for many of us to start our journey into Buddhism in the West through books, because it's very accessible. They're easy to find, and it's something you can do on your own. And if you don't like it, you can just put the book back on the shelf or sell the book or something and move on to something else, right? But yeah, books have their strengths and they have their limitations. The problem with a book is that you can't ask questions, right? Problem with the book is that you don't get responses to those questions that you do have. Whatever's on the page is what you get, and that's what you're stuck with. And I think it's important to have that sense of community because of the fact that that's how the Dharma has been shared for thousands of years, going all the way back to the Buddha. It was always community and always in discussion and conversation. The dialogue that we have is how the Dharma continues on in the world. That's how it gets passed down forever, right? Hopefully. Long enough, forever for us, because we're finite beings, but that's the way it's been passed down, through sharing together our struggles and our triumphs in the Dharma. And whatever insights we gain, we pass on. The other thing that you were talking about in terms of mindfulness, that's good. I remember going through that too, where I'm like, I'm going to turn off the radio, really pay attention to the road and all that. And what we want to make sure that we don't do is have only just like the bare awareness kind of mindfulness, where we're just noticing the sunlight on the windshield and look at the breeze and wow, there's a bird. Because yeah, we still want to be present in those moments. So I think it's always important to remember that mindfulness, as it's as it's seen in the Pali Suttas, is not the sort of bare attention that's pretty common now. You know, like how slowly can you eat your oatmeal mindfulness, but the mindfulness that has ardency, alertness, and sati, in that sense of mindfulness being more the ability to keep things in mind, keeping the Dharma in mind, keeping the focus of your attention in mind, keeping it all in mind, bringing it all together, mind and body, right? And so that means that mindfulness in this sense would be looking at what's happening to your mind as the phenomena is unfolding in front of you, as you're on the road, as that bump in the road happens, what's happening to the mind, as you hear that song on the radio, what's happening to the mind. It's always bringing it back to seeing what's happening there and seeing what needs to be fine-tuned and adjusted as we apply skillful right effort. So that would be my comment on that. Thank you so much, Vincent. Anything else? Hey, Victor.
Hi, I just wanted to thank you for your wonderful talk.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and then Pasquale, I did see what you wrote in the chat. I didn't get a chance to read all of it, but it's good to see you here, Pasquale. Pasquale and I have taken a couple classes together at University of the West.
Yeah, great to see you, Stephen. I'm so happy you're working with the children at that temple in Escondido.
Yeah, it's proving to be very, very rewarding. If only just to see all these kids take such an interest in the topic, you know, because of the group, there's some that are really they're really tuned in. You know, they get to take these little quizzes at the end of the class on Kahoot, so they get to type in their responses on the laptop or on their phone, and they're really enjoying the process. Get a lot of comments and questions afterwards. So that's really heartening, you know, as we think about the future of the Dharma in the United States. Yeah.
Good to see you. Thank you so much.
Any other question or comment?
Yes, I have a question.
All right, go ahead, John. Yes, go ahead.
It looks like John was muted. I also saw Elaine as well. So Elaine, do you want to go first, and then we'll get back to John? Sorry, John. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Elaine, and I'm in Seattle. I've lived here for like the last, I don't know, 28 years. And before I lived here, I lived in Los Angeles, and I got to practice at IBMC. So I'm really glad to be able to be with you all online and hear the Dharma talk, which was wonderful. So thank you.
Oh.
I have, I guess, a question. And the question is, you were describing your earlier experience of kind of being saturated with a lot of stimulating movies, that sort of thing, a lot of consumption of images and such. And that is a place that I have slipped back into. I had a surgery, and I ended up spending a lot of time recuperating on YouTube and just places where, I was not consuming things that were conducive to the life I want to live. And so I am curious about your process of getting from being, the person who loved the action movies and just all the not so great stimulation to being open enough to listen to yourself and listen for the Dharma.
Thank you, Elaine. Well, I'm so glad you were able to reconnect with IBMC, and I hear Seattle's really nice. I've never been, so hopefully one day I'll be able to go. You bring up such a good question, because I think it's something that we all experience, especially with the last year and a half or so that many of us have had to stay home a lot of the time, and it's right there. And man, doesn't YouTube know it? It seems like all the commercials, all the ads on YouTube have popped up and triple and quadrupled because they know everyone's watching YouTube videos, and all the streaming services are right there with a bunch of new content. Like, don't you want to watch it all? And can't miss the new thing everyone's watching, and you'd be out of the loop. Who wants that? But But in terms of how we wean ourselves off of those things, for the very at the very beginning of it, there has to be a sense of wanting that. In Buddhism, it's quite easy to think that because we talk about desire as in a kind of negative sense, desire of all kinds are bad. But in truth, the Buddha would separate unwholesome desire, tanha, with wholesome, like with a more neutral kind of desire that itself can be wholesome, chanda, right? And the idea being that there's wholesome desire in wanting to be a Buddhist, wanting to follow the path, wanting to cultivate qualities like loving kindness, compassion in the mind. And so at the very beginning, you already stated a desire that maybe you want to wean yourself off of the kind of habits you formed. And that can be something that you can build on. You can actually build on the wholesome desire and start changing that desire into habits. And that means that what I've done, at least in my own life, is to take that desire to do something different with my time and make sure that that's the voice that has the microphone. One of my teachers talks about the committee in the mind. There's all these competing voices in the mind trying to tell you to do one thing and the other thing. And a lot of the time, many of us go after the one that has the most quickest reward. Like all these ones are saying, go on the jog, eat vegetables, do this, but this one says, have a brownie. And man, that voice seems to always have the microphone, And it's the same thing. You can look at that one voice that's saying, well, perhaps do this with your free time, and give that one the microphone. And then see how many times in your day you can actually listen to that voice and begin acting on that voice's suggestion. And then from there, it becomes a habit. And then, like any habit, the only way it stays that way is by maintaining it. It's the maintenance of the habit. And so for me, I chose to find other things to do with my time. I still love podcasts. I listen to different podcasts. I still love books. I read different books. I still love to watch TV with my wife in the evening. We watch different TV. And so it isn't so much that I've stopped those things, because I'm a lay person living a lay life with a spouse, but I change the kind of things I do. And I see the effect that has on my mind, that as I start seeing the benefits, as I feel the benefits, as I start feeling better, it becomes much easier to make that choice repeatable again and again. And then that becomes the new habit. That becomes the new way of being. That becomes the new lifestyle I adopt. So I hope that's helpful.
That's helpful. I like the analogy of the mic. I will think about that. So yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And then John.
Thanks, Gus. I guess my question was twofold. One is, because in terms of doing the daily meditation and then trying to support that throughout your day to day, is there concrete steps to take? Because I know that's kind of amorphous. Like I know I recite the precepts every day, and I guess that could be the filter through which you look at trying to implement change in your life, is like being mindful about the precepts as you go about your day, maybe. And then we'll go ahead. I had a second part, but
yeah, okay. If we have time, we'll get to the second part. I'm noticing that we're coming up on 12.
okay.
So the first part, at the very least, there are some concrete things I can suggest that I do myself. When I schedule formal meditation for myself, whether it be in the morning or the evening, I schedule more time than I actually plan on sitting. And the reason for that is because I want to be very careful about what I do as I leave the cushion, right? If I'm late for something and the moment I get off that cushion, I'm rushing to like take a shower, put on this, do everything, get my cup, get my coffee or tea or whatever. I'm running down the steps, doing all this stuff, getting in the car, getting on the freeway, when then there's traffic. I'm already bringing all this stuff into the mind that I just spent 30, 40, 50 minutes settling down, creating that calm, peaceful, pleasant abiding, right? That's the foundation for true, strong mindfulness. They can actually start changing our experience and changing the habits. So creating enough of a buffer so that what you do is more reflective and calm allows to those steps to continue onward. You're still looking at the mind as you go about your activity. And that doesn't mean you just sit around for an extra half hour after the meditation. You can do other things. Like if there's chores around the house, you'd be surprised at how much you can get out of doing the dishes after meditation, or going on a walk around the neighborhood, or reading a nice book, something like that. It doesn't have to be something that doesn't occupy the mind. It just has to be something more controllable, something that you have a firmer grasp on, something that you're confident that you can continue to be in that pleasant state, that pleasant abiding, and apply mindfulness in a consistent way. And then as you're able to do that in those situations, you'll find that you start rewiring the brain. You're much more able to do that in more stressful situations, be able to keep that coolness in the mind, have that place to stand on, the firm foundation through which you can interact with more stressful situations in life. So that's how I've done it. I've made sure to sort of buffer my meditation and be very much in control of what I do, and also to make sure I'm watching the mind as I get out of meditation. They don't just assume, I try not to assume that just because I'm getting off the cushion, the meditation has ended. I try to prolong the meditation as long as I can as I get off the cushion and as I go about my day. So that might be something worth trying.
Okay. And if we have time, the second part was, for my work, I do have to watch a lot of action movies and stuff, and I do enjoy them. And I do think you watch The Matrix and stuff. Some of them have subtext and have more to put out to the world than just like beating people up. I mean, is it okay to still consume that kind of stuff and still try to work on your, does it have to conflict with your practice, I guess?
It's not that it necessarily will conflict for any, let's say, moralistic reasons, but you might find that it does something to the mind. There might be like a heaviness or a kind of aggression, a grumpiness that might be there as a result, or even like a more like active sense in the body. Like I'll bring it back to an experience I had when I was a teenager, where I was training in martial arts as a teenager, because I was all into everything Eastern. So I wasn't just studying Buddhism, I was doing martial arts and stuff. And I'd been training my body to fight, even though the idea is you train so you don't have to fight. That's what they always say. But I would notice that as I was watching martial arts movies and watching really violent action movies, I could feel my muscles kind of twitch. Like I was anticipating, like I was going to, I'm the guy fighting up there. Like I'm Sylvester Stallone, right? Or whoever. And you see that it is having an effect. And so if it's a part of your livelihood to watch those things, then there's some aspect of it that is unavoidable. But I will say that you showed signs of something very good and something you can build on, which is you're looking for other things happening within the movie, other context, other subtext. But then even more than that, what you can always do is try to balance it out with something else. Like after you're done for the day watching all that stuff, if you are going to watch something else, well, make sure it's something very different, something more conducive to the mental states we try to cultivate in Buddhism. Or give yourself a break from all media for a while anyway. Like, all right, I've watched all that stuff for work. I'm going to make sure there's no screens around me for the rest of the day. Something like that. That's what I would do in your situation, to try to balance it out, to counteract those effects, right? It's kind of like if someone were training, the Rock is in incredible shape, but that doesn't mean he's never had a stack of pancakes, right? It just means that after he's had that stack of pancakes, he's got to do something about it. You can't just let that pancake sit in his gut for the rest of the day, And so sort of the same idea that like here you're kind of taking in junk food. Make sure you get some broccoli after, and that'll counteract the effects, I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for everybody. Thank you, Subodha, about your experience teaching to tiny kids, and keep going and do more practice and got more experience about the teaching. Thank you again, Subodha, and everybody, and hope to see you next time, Subodha, next month sometime. Right now we're going to chant the page 4 and page 10. And before that, next Sunday is Reverend Kusala is going to give a Dhamma talk. Right now we're going to chant page 4 and page 10. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato ma sambuddhassa Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. Deluding passions are inexhaustible. I vow to send them all. Dharma gates are limitless. I vow to study them all. Buddha's way is supreme. I vow to attain it. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fearless fearless be. May the grieving shadow of grief and the sick find help freely. Nguyện ý thử không đưa phổ nhớ tiếng ngã đành dự chung sanh giai cộng thân Phật đạo. Nguyện di sự công đức phổ cập nhất thiết ngã đặng dự chung sanh giai cộng thân Phật đạo. Nguyện di tự công đức phổ cập nhất thiết ngã đặng dự chung sanh giai cộng thân Phật đạo. Thank you again for everybody. By the power of the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, you all be well and happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.